Scott Jones is the head of the Cybersecurity Center, and he is with me now. Mr. Jones, good to see you. Thanks for coming to speak with me about your report today. And boy, it comes out on a very, at a very timely time, if I can put it that way, given what we have making news today. China in the news in a big way today with the arrest in this country of the CFO of Huawei. How big? Let me start there. How big of a threat to Canada is China as a foreign state actor when it comes to cyber threats?
Well, I think the key thing that we've been trying to highlight in this report is it's all about being prepared, no matter where the threat comes from. It's about knowing what threats you face so that you can take actions ahead of time to prevent any sort of malicious cyber activity. And that's the key message of this report, is to really talk about how do you take actions? What are the things we can each do, whether we're citizens, businesses, critical infrastructure, or governments, to really protect ourselves before something happens.
And we're going to get into some of that, but I mean, you talk about concerns in your assessment about foreign state actors. So where's China on the list? Right at the top?
So there's a number of countries that are right on the top. And it's, for us though, the key thing is it's not about one country or another. Because the fact is, cyber is within the means of many different countries around the world. So we need to be defending against them all. Certainly, I think the report indicates that there are some countries that have been active. There's some examples that we put in there to show people, you know, these are real things that happen, and to take action.
Right. When you assess threats, I mean, all kinds of things go into it, I'm sure, but we have now today Canada arresting the CFO of a major technology company, and the Chinese are objecting to that. Is that likely to make is that likely to increase the threat? We are now on the wrong side of China on this story, and does that put us at more risk?
Well, there's always trigger events for any sort of cybersecurity incident, and that's why we really want to put the emphasis on being prepared ahead of time. If you're reacting the day something happens, you're too late. And so it's all about being proactive in cybersecurity, really taking those actions to protect yourself in advance, no matter where the threat could come from, because the trigger could change tomorrow.
Right. You talk about it in your report that state actors would not go after infrastructure in this country in the absence of hostilities between countries. And I guess that's where I'm at with the latest news today. Is this an event that could trigger hostilities, in which case maybe infrastructure is more vulnerable?
Well, the fact is we always plan for the worst, and we always work with our critical infrastructure partners to start to prepare what would happen if somebody chose to come after Canada. But right now we don't feel that that threat is tomorrow. The key thing is that is crossing a threshold in international norms where you start to get into other responses, you get into acts of war, etc. And that's where our foreign affairs colleagues start to step in, and to our military colleagues. For us though, it's about preparing in advance. Even though the probability is low, we always prepare for the worst, so that we're ready for it if it ever does arrive.
One of the big concerns is Huawei and 5G technology, the next generation of technology. Lots of concerns about allowing Canadian companies to buy Huawei technology. Australia and the US have said no to it. What kind of a threat do you believe that Huawei represents to Canada, and should we ban them too from 5G wireless networks in this country?
So I think the key thing with 5G and the next generation of wireless technology is that we start to look at it from the holistic from the start. No matter where the vendor comes from, the threats are the same, but also they change. So how are we going to address those threats systemically and step by step, and you layer things in. At the end of the day, there's a comprehensive security review going on in the government, but it's broader than just that.
And you're involved in that?
We're involved in that, but we're one member of a broader government, a government response to this, to provide advice on what should the decision be on going forward for Canada's 5G networks.
So you're the threat assessment guys. Is it your expert opinion that Canada can protect itself from any threats that might be presented by Huawei 5G?
Well, we're not closing any doors right now on what the right mitigation measures would be. We want to make sure that we take the time to do a comprehensive security review that takes into account how Canada is responding, how Canada's telecommunications companies are going to deploy 5G technology, and what choices they're going to make. And that's one of the key things, is how do we do this always in context.
Okay, let's drill down on some of the other issues, some of the actual issues in the report. You know, I was intrigued by you pointing out for all Canadians that there's threats in everyday devices, you know, such as TVs, or in my case, the new Wi-Fi thermostat I just installed. How do those devices make us more vulnerable?
Well, the fact is, it's that there's so many of them, and they're frequently designed to be low cost, and security costs money, and we don't look for it. So when we go and buy things, we're looking for the next cool gadget that does something really interesting from a functionality point of view, but we don't ask questions about security. So what are some of the things that we can do in terms of even when we install them? We just recently put out a buyer's guide for Black Friday. It's on our Get Cyber Safe campaign, which talks about here's some things that you can do. If you buy that wireless thermostat, well, make sure you change, if you can change the password, make sure you can change it from the default. That increases its cybersecurity. Can it receive updates? That's really important, that these are able to be updated. So if you bought a better quality thermostat or a better quality any device, is it getting updates? Is it getting updates regularly? And some of those are security related. And then frankly, thinking about where you're putting them. So that smart television, I'm certainly not saying don't use it. But do you want that camera pointing at in your bedroom or in a sensitive part of your house? Right. Or do you want to cover the camera up? It's a simple mitigation measure. Put a little piece of tape or a shutter over the camera.
But a lot of stuff that most people just don't think about, right? And that's part of this assessment threat. Part of it's awareness to make people understand, look, here's how you can be vulnerable, right?
Absolutely.
Okay, so what or who in Canada is at most risk as we head into 2019?
Well, I think what we are all at risk as Canadians from cybercrime. It is a money-making enterprise. There's a lot of money to be seen there, but we're not targeted as individuals. We're targeted as a society. And so taking some simple security measures can make us less vulnerable to that. The criminals will move on. They're not going to invest to capture a random Canadian's information if they can. If it's going to cost them more money, they'll move to the next target that's easier. So simple things. Updating your software is a simple step we can all take. Thinking about security when we buy something, not for a lot of time, but making sure we do change those default passwords, etc.
I think it was really interesting in the report as I read through it too, that there is now, I'm not sure how many people understand the breadth and scope of what's happening out there. There's now a whole economy supported behind the scenes, effectively a black market economy supported behind the scenes of criminal activity that information about you or me or whatever else is obtained is out on the market and in this sort of other economy that's taking place behind the scenes. Tell me about that.
So that's absolutely the case. In many cases, you can actually buy cybercrime tools or lease them, and you get better support than we do when we buy our technology today. There's money to be made in this. There's an online marketplace where they exchange information that's been taken. One of the scams that's been highlighted in the report is actually, it was one compromise. They got a password, and then they sent something to try to scare you into paying them a ransom. Right. There was actually nothing behind it other than they had a password from another compromise. So that's just some of the things where we have to be aware. There is a market for this, and what information are we giving? When we seed our information, we don't place a value on our personal information. Well, do they need it, and why? Why are we asking for it? And we should be a little bit more discerning as Canadians and as individuals when we give this information out to people.
Let's finish on this. We're entering into an election year here. We're in the lead up to the next election. Are we likely to be? Are foreign state actors likely to try and influence our next election?
So the report highlights that Canadians will face online influence activities, whether that's from foreign actors or domestically or from just individual other citizens. Mm-hmm. It could absolutely happen. Foreign actors will depend on what the issue of the day and what their national interests are. But we need to be prepared. This is all about preparedness, being ready in advance, being critical consumers of information, and frankly not believing what we're reading on social media, turning to more trusted sources. Traditional media, journalists who actually research their stories and verify facts, looking to our trusted source of information and where do we collect it from, and really looking with a critical eye. And that's one of the key things for preparedness.
All right, Scott Jones, good to talk to you. Thanks for coming in.
Thank you very much.